lion's mane has compounds in it that will stimulate what's called nerve growth factor. And nerve growth factor will activate and will promote the growth of neurons. And so our nerve cells, they are dying off all the time. They're being regenerated all the time. But as we get older and at certain points in our life, that process slows down and we start to kind of lose these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately, if we lose them too quickly or too much, somebody's going to end up with dementia. And certainly as we get older, our memory starts to fade away. So a lot of people now are taking lion's mane just as a nootropic to help sort of stimulate the whole memory. And there's actually some really good clinical trials out there that were done in Japan where they took groups of people with a control group and gave them tests, gave them lion's mane. At the end of this 3-month period, the people that took the lion's mane, and not a lot, 3 dried grams, had higher scores than the people that didn't.
Hey friends, welcome to the HealthSimple Show. I'm your host, Kyle Reidhead, and I interview health and wellness experts from around the world to help you live healthy, happy, and stress-free. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and if you have any questions about anything we talk about through this episode, just comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Enjoy the show.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to HealthSimple Radio. I am joined with Jeff Chilton today, who is in Tofino, British Columbia, actually, which is pretty cool. So, Jeff, welcome to the show, first of all. And
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And so I just have a question to get started here. What got you so interested in mushrooms? For the listeners, we're going to be talking all about mushrooms. Jeff, as I mentioned in the intro, is a mushroom expert. He studied it in school and runs a company called Namix. But I'm curious, what gets someone so interested in mushrooms?
Well, you know, out here in British Columbia and where I grew up down in Seattle, Washington, it rains a lot. It's evergreen. We have vast forests, and mushrooms love this type of climate, kind of a mild climate. In the fall, it rains. We have mushrooms coming up everywhere. And I kind of, I went out mushroom hunting early when I was young. And listen, Kyle, mushroom hunting is like a treasure hunt. It's really cool. You go out, you cruise through the forests, you're kind of having a great time, and then you see some mushroom that someone says, that one is a choice edible. You run over, you grab it, it's treasure, right? So that kind of got me interested. And then when I went to university, I actually studied ethno-mycology, which is the study of mushrooms in different cultures. And listen, I was in university in the 60s, right? Mushrooms, the 60s. I mean, so a lot of reasons to be interested in mushrooms. And we even had magic mushrooms in our locale up in the Northwest. So, when I studied them at university, I was looking at mushrooms use as food, mushrooms use as medicine, and mushrooms in shamanism in cultures worldwide. So that was my area of study.
That is super, super interesting. So I've never done magic mushrooms because I don't know if this is true, and I'm going to ask you because I never even thought about asking this, but so I'm allergic to penicillin, and I was told that if you're allergic to penicillin, you can't have magic mushrooms. Is this true or not? Because
no, I've never heard that before. No, it's not true. Absolutely not true.
Okay, awesome.
No, I mean, you know what? It's kind of like they say if you've got a yeast infection, in terms of some people have candida in their stomach, or they say, oh, don't eat mushrooms. It's like, no, there's absolutely no evidence for anything like that that I've ever seen.
Really? Okay. Because I know, you don't want to eat like fermented vegetables or fermented foods if you have candida, or if you have like a yeast overgrowth. But I did kind of wonder about the mushrooms thing, but I had never seen any research on it or had seen much
there isn't any. And mushrooms are not fermented.
Mushrooms
basically are grown on natural materials. They're like other vegetables. There's 90% water. The rest is dry matter. So no, that's something that really I don't hear people talking about it too much anymore, but it's come up over the years.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, vegetables, we all know about the nutritional benefits of them, right? Full of vitamins and minerals, and same with fruit. But mushrooms have, also a big nutritional component to them as well that are very beneficial from what I've seen anyway for humans. Can you sort of, dive into it a little bit and just kind of talk about what the nutritional benefits are of mushrooms?
Oh, absolutely. Mushrooms, and first of all, let me say, every mushroom species will have a little bit different nutritional profile. Just like, because you think of mushrooms and it's kind of like saying fruit. It's like every fruit will have a little bit different. Mushrooms are high in protein. They've got anywhere from 20 to 40% protein, high quality protein with a good amino acid profile. They're primarily carbohydrates, anywhere from 30 to 60% carbohydrates, but those carbohydrates are really good carbohydrates, like mannitol, which is a very slow acting carbohydrate, low GI index type of carbohydrate. They also have carbohydrates called beta glucans. And beta glucans make up the cell wall of a mushroom, and beta glucans are the immunologically active part of mushrooms. So that's something you'll get. And then low in fat, like maybe 7% fat, but linoleic acid, which is a really good fat, high in phosphorus, potassium, and B vitamins, riboflavin, biotin, and niacin, B1, 2, and 3. Very good amounts of B vitamins. So really, they're a great food. The other thing about mushrooms is that they're high in fiber. So they are not digested in your stomach, but they're digested down in the intestinal tract, and that fiber is feeding the microbiome. So Kyle, the first thing I tell people when they're talking about mushrooms, they're going, can I supplement and things like that? I'm saying, first of all, eat mushrooms.
Yeah.
Put them into your diet. They're a great food.
Mm-hmm. Whole foods first, always over supplements.
Oh man, absolutely.
Now, mushrooms would be similar to like a vegetable where it's kind of low calorie, because you say it's high in protein, high in carbs, but it'd be low calorie or no?
Absolutely. And that's so interesting that you brought that up, because when I started growing mushrooms, and I went and got a job at a mushroom farm in 1973, I spent 10 years on this farm growing mushrooms. It was a big farm. We grew 2 million pounds of mushrooms a year. Back then, classical nutritionists looked at mushrooms and they said, hey, they taste good. Maybe they're there for flavor or garnish or something. The reason they said it was because they were low calorie. And to a classical nutritionist, it was like low cal, not a real food.
Yeah, makes sense. So mushrooms are they're kind of confusing to me, but I was in New Zealand last year and I had met a guy, and we were sitting there having a beer, and we were talking. He wanted to talk about mushrooms. He was super into mushrooms. It was crazy, but it was really interesting. And so he kind of talked about how they're their own species, but they're a very smart species. They're the largest species in the world, or on this planet. Can you just kind of give me a lowdown of like what a mushroom is? And
yeah. Well, he wasn't actually saying I wouldn't imagine that their own species. What he meant is they have their own kingdom. So there's like plants in one kingdom and animals in the other, and mushrooms kind of sit in the middle. And what's kind of interesting about mushrooms is that they're like humans in the sense that they breathe in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. The other thing that they do is that they actually have glycogen. A plant has as their storage carbohydrate starch. And that's one of the things, that's what gives plants a lot of their energy that we get from them, is that starch. We have glycogen as our storage carbohydrate. So we share a few of these attributes with fungi, but it is a separate kingdom. There are hundreds of thousands of different species of fungi out there, and mushrooms are actually just a small part of that whole kingdom. And just quickly, let me just go through this for a minute. Mushrooms do not have seeds.
Mhm.
Mushrooms, and when we think of mushrooms, this organism, it has spores. They start with a spore. The spore, when the conditions are right, germinates into a very fine filament. And that filament is out there in the ground. It's in a piece of wood. We don't normally see it. When multiple filaments come together, they form a network. And that network is called mycelium.
Mhm.
That mycelium is the actual fungal body. And when conditions are right, it produces a mushroom. And the mushroom comes up, it matures, drops spores, and then completes the life cycle. So in a sense, mushrooms have what I call three plant parts. They have spores, they have this mycelium, and then the mushroom itself. So that's what makes up this organism.
Okay, very interesting. Now, you said there's hundreds of thousands of different types of fungi, but what differentiates mushrooms that we would find in the grocery store compared to, I guess there's medicinal mushrooms now and then magical mushrooms. What kind of what makes these so different?
Well, first of all, there are edible mushrooms that are also medicinal, which is really cool because that's what you and I are both looking for, which is kind of like
Yeah,
food is medicine, right?
exactly.
Food that not only nourishes us, but it provides us with medicine. So all mushrooms actually have these beta glucans in them, but the beta glucan in different species can have a little bit different architecture. And that architecture is what makes the difference between one mushroom being highly active as a medicinal or not so active. So all mushrooms will have the beta glucans, but not all the beta glucans are created equal. So that's really why some mushrooms are more medicinal than others. And also some mushrooms have that actually make other compounds. Think about this for a second. Why does a mushroom make psilocybin? It's like, what's
Mhm.
the story, right? But they will make compounds like that, and they make all sorts of alkaloids and other compounds. There are mushrooms that make compounds that will kill us, right?
Mhm.
Toxins. So it's a real interesting group of organisms, but that's kind of what makes them different.
What's the reason that they would make these compounds that would kill us or that may be medicinal? Is there I mean, plants have like a defensive mechanism, right? Where let's say like lectin, for example, where it's sort of it's a defensive mechanism for them, but it's harmful for us to eat somewhat. Why would a mushroom be creating compounds that would be harmful for us?
Well, you're asking a question that nobody really can answer in
Okay.
general, right? Because, and the way I address that is this, as humans, we're constantly asking why.
Yeah.
you know
Exactly.
and this is what's called a teleology. So teleological thinking is, what's the purpose of this? And you hear it all the time. It's like, oh, you know what, they have red berries because it's going to attract something and that will spread. And then the other thing says, oh no, never eat a red berry because red berries are always poisonous and they don't want you to eat them because it's poison. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute here. It's like you can really get tripped up in all of that. And so a lot of people think, well, we don't really know right now why
Okay.
certain things are done. I mean, we can say, okay, a pheromone will be an attractant and things like that. But no, a lot of times it's just like, we don't really know why these mushrooms produce those compounds because some of them are beneficial, some of them are not. Hard to say.
Who knows? Okay, cool. Thank you. So mushrooms are being used medicinally. What kind of and this is in supplement form, I think, and then also as whole food. What would they be used for? What kind of conditions? What who might be the type of person that would need to use mushrooms?
Well, you know what? In general, I look at mushrooms as what I'd call prevention, something that
Okay.
it will, when we consume mushrooms, either as a food or as a supplement, what they do is primarily they will sit in the background and they will just help us cope, because what they do with these beta glucans is they have the ability to activate our immune cells. which is really cool. They're considered a biological response modifier. In other words, they will activate immune cells if we need them. If we don't, they won't. They kind of sit in the background. They're what a lot of people call an adaptogen in that sense.
Yeah.
So they all have that one activity in common, but they also have other activities, which is kind of cool. Have you ever heard at all about a mushroom called lion's mane?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay,
I
lion's
haven't
mane
had
right
it yet,
now.
but I've heard all
Yeah,
about it.
well, it's kind of the flavor of the month to some degree, right?
Yeah.
It's like people who are into nootropics,
Yeah.
and we all are, because we all want something that enhances our natural abilities in some way, right? Like I drink coffee in the morning, and caffeine is a nootropic. Well, lion's mane has compounds in it that will stimulate what's called nerve growth factor. And nerve growth factor will activate and will promote the growth of neurons. And so our nerve cells, they are dying off all the time. They're being regenerated all the time. But as we get older and at certain points in our life, that process slows down and we start to kind of lose these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately, if we lose them too quickly or too much, somebody's going to end up with dementia or something like that. So certainly as we get older, our memory starts to fade away and we're like, what was that again? I can't remember that, whatever it was. So lion's mane has these compounds that will stimulate nerve growth factor. And so a lot of people now are taking lion's mane just as a nootropic to help sort of stimulate the whole memory. And there's actually some really good clinical trials out there that were done in Japan where they took groups of people with a control group and gave them tests, gave them lion's mane. At the end of this 3-month period, the people that took the lion's mane, and not a lot, 3 dried grams, had higher scores than the people that didn't. And here's one of the cool things about it is that then they stopped taking lion's mane for a month.
Yeah.
They tested them again, and the people who had taken the lion's mane and then stopped ended up going right back down to where the other control group was.
Wow.
I know, it's kind of like, holy smokes, that. Well, and it's like, okay, so you're going to have to take lion's mane the rest of your life.
Well, and I've seen a lot of people putting it in their coffee too. I haven't gotten to doing that yet, but I've seen it's becoming a big thing.
Yeah, well, it's the same with reishi. Reishi's in a lot of coffee products now, and that's where I put my reishi. Reishi's really bitter. It's a bitter mushroom. It's not the kind of mushroom. It's also woody. So you don't eat reishi as a food, but you do drink it as a tea or something like that. So I just put a teaspoon into my coffee pot in the morning, and that's just another bitter note to my black coffee, which I don't really sweeten in any way.
Yeah. So I actually got some reishi mushroom extract from a company. They sent me it when they found out that I was coming here. And so I've been using it because it's a good immune booster. And, when you come to Bali, there's the water isn't great. The vegetables are covered in the water. So a lot of them have what's called the Bali belly. And so I've kind of had some supplements to help me through. And so far I've had no issues. So, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So reishi, you can have it whole. I had it as an extract. Is that still, when you have it as a supplement, is it still going to be just as good, or what do you think the difference between the two?
Most reishi supplements are extracts. Mm-hmm. What my company sells are extracts. And the reason being is that if you're selling supplements and you're saying, okay, take 2 500 milligram capsules.
Yeah.
Well, if that's not concentrated in some way, chances are you're not going to get enough of the beneficial compounds in just that 1,000 milligrams. So that's where concentrating it down either 4 times or 10 times or whatever really helps to get enough of those compounds into that small amount of material. We have a reishi extract actually that's a 16 to 1 concentration. And man, when you take it, it is like, wow, it is bitter. And we sometimes do a reishi challenge where we have people try it out and they taste it and they're like,
bit aggressive. So I want to step back a little bit. You went to, I don't know when it was, but you went to China to learn about mushrooms, and then you started growing and farming mushrooms. Can you sort of talk about that process first? Why'd you go to China? For that, is our mushrooms, is that the spot to be, I guess. And then how do you farm mushrooms? What can you kind of talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I spent 10 years on the mushroom farm in Washington State. And then while I was there, I was reading a lot about mushrooms in general. And I was lucky enough to have a Japanese scientist there who was growing shiitake, enoki, oyster mushroom, which opened up a whole new world of like, wow, I can grow these other mushrooms too, which was really cool. Well, I also read about medicinal mushrooms. Well, where does the whole medicinal mushroom tradition come from? Primarily Asia and traditional Chinese medicine. So in 1989, I was part of a group called the International Society for Mushroom Science, and they had an international conference in China in 1989, and I went, I got to go. I went to this conference. It really opened my eyes, and I spent all of the 90s traveling back and forth, and I visited farms, I visited research institutes, I went to conferences, I've met processors, and part of what happened was I realized that I could not grow mushrooms in North America economically enough to sell them as supplements, because remember, when you sell a fresh mushroom, it's like most vegetables, it's 90% water, and you have to dry it out. Supplements are not, they're not wet, they're a dry powder. So all of a sudden, if you're getting $5 for that fresh pound of mushrooms, you got to get $50 now for that same pound. Economics doesn't work. In China, they've been growing mushrooms since the 12th century. These people know how to do it. They actually today grow 85% of the world's mushrooms.
Wow.
I realized right away that if I was going to get into the supplement business, and that's what I decided on, and I started my company Namex in 1989. I knew I was going to have to grow the mushrooms in China, process them in China. So I started that, and here's how mushrooms grow. First of all, I was telling you that mushrooms don't have seeds. So how do you plant a mushroom, right? Well, one of the standard ways that's fairly easy to visualize is they'll take a log that's 3 feet long and maybe 6 inches in diameter, and they will drill holes in that log, and every 6 inches, and they'll do a pattern 6 inches down that log, and then what they use as seed for growing mushrooms are not spores. They actually use live mycelium. So mycelium will get grown out on sawdust, and then that myceliated sawdust, you will poke that into the holes that have been drilled in that log. In about 12 to 18 months, that log will be full of that mycelium, which just penetrates in and consumes that log. And at that point, you give it the right conditions, and mushrooms will start to come out of that log.
How long does it take for the mushroom to grow fully for you to actually take it and use it?
Well, you know what? Once that log has been colonized, and that might take, let's just say, 18 months, then when you want mushrooms to grow, you will soak it in water, and then within 30 days, mushrooms will start coming out of the log. So 30 days after you soak it, you'll be harvesting the mushrooms. Now that's a long cycle if you're a mushroom grower. So the other thing that they do now is they will take sawdust, and sawdust is wetted up because it's got to be a certain moisture content. A little bit of nutrient is added. It's put into a plastic type bag that they can then sterilize. When it comes out of the sterilizer, now they will put the live mycelium into this sawdust log. It will grow out much faster. Maybe it'll grow out in 90 days instead of a year and a half. So it grows out in 90 days. And if you have thousands upon thousands of these little logs, then after that grow out period, you put them on shelves, you give them the right temperature, and there'll be some holes in those bags that you put in there, and mushrooms will start to grow out of those holes.
Wow. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. I mean, as a mushroom grower, I'm totally fascinated in
Yeah,
all
for
of that,
sure.
and have grown millions of pounds of mushrooms in my life.
Now, the food industry really loves to ruin our food when they
Oh
want to make it
God.
mainstream and they want to get it out to the masses. Our vegetables are covered in pesticides, they're GMO. Our
Oh
meat and our
man.
animals are filled with, antibiotics and growth hormone and all that crap. Is mushrooms going down the same path? Do they have this issue? Are there pesticides or are there other chemicals that are used to grow it? Or is it fairly clean?
Well, you know what? When I started growing mushrooms in 1973, again on a big farm, I mean, 2 million pounds of mushrooms a year. We had actually what was really kind of cool is we had 200 crops every year, 200 single crops. Each crop would put out 20,000 pounds of mushrooms, and it was in a continuous cycle.
Mhm.
Now, now there was a program that we had. And that program started out on, let's say, week 1, you spray it with this chemical. Week 5, you spray it with that. Pesticides, fungicides. Holy shit, let me tell you, it was ugly.
Okay.
And you know what? As a young guy working on a farm, loving what he's doing, I applied a lot of chemicals while I was there.
Yeah.
It was not pretty, believe me. And today, and this was an agaricus farm, the button mushroom that you see out there mostly in the stores.
Yeah.
Today, they have basically cycled that back to where they don't use nearly the level of chemicals that they used to use. So
Okay.
really, I would say that agaricus mushroom today is not too bad chemical wise. But normally, if you go to the store and you, let's say, buy a shiitake mushroom or one of the other kind of specialty mushrooms, chances are there will be no chemicals used on that at all because it's a small
Really?
farmer.
Okay.
It's kind of a faster cycle. So very few chemicals, if any, are on those. And listen, my company's been certified organic since 1992.
Hmm.
After I'm certified organic. I'm in China. I'm organizing mushroom growing for me. In 1997, I went to China with OCIA, which is one of the largest organic certifiers in the United States. And we had the very first organic certification workshop for mushrooms in
Cool.
China, 1997. And they're not certified by some fly-by-night Chinese certifiers or anything like that, give them a little money and, to tell you what you want. No, German certifiers, high-quality German certifiers. And before our products even leave the country, they're tested for pesticides, fungicides, heavy metals, all of that. Because, listen, you know, China gets a pretty bad rap okay, listen, the industrial areas of China are not pretty.
Yeah.
Neither's the Gulf Coast of the United States, or even Bali. I mean, I've heard, and my son's been to Bali, and you get out in the water out there, and you're just like, what the hell is in this water?
Yeah.
It's like it's a worldwide phenomena, and because of that, I mean, I'm totally. I eat organic produce. I buy organic produce, fruits and vegetables. That's important to me,
Hmm.
and I believe in that ethic. So my products, they're certified organic, and I totally believe in that. Absolutely.
Okay. Interesting. So for the most part, if I'm going to a mainstream grocery store and I'm getting mushrooms from there, and they're non-organic, they are going to have some pesticides and that on it.
I would say if it's the button mushroom,
But mushrooms,
probably.
yeah.
If it's
Okay.
a shiitake mushroom, probably not. The small growers you might find in the farmers market, they
Yeah.
won't be certified, but most of them will not be using chemicals.
Okay.
For one,
Awesome.
they can't really afford it. For two, they don't want to.
Yeah.
And so really, and they can't afford to be certified, which is really, kind of expensive if you're just a small grower.
Hmm.
But most of them would not be using chemicals. So I could say, yeah, for the most part, 95% of the time, any of those small growers would not be using
Awesome.
chemicals on their crops.
So if you cook a mushroom, does it ruin the nutrients that are in it? I mean, if you cook vegetables on high heat, then if it's high enough, it's going to ruin some of the nutrients that are in there. are mushrooms similar, or are they more resilient in some way, or is there a preferred way to eat them, whether it's raw or I don't know what else people would do with
Yeah,
them?
no, no, absolutely. The thing is that, I think any food, if you expose it to high heat, like in a fry pan,
Yeah.
whatever surface is exposed, you'll probably kill enzymes, vitamins, things like that. But you know what? For mushrooms, what I do, and I like to cook them over high heat in a fry pan, but slice them fairly thick.
Okay.
One of the worst things you can do with mushrooms is cook them on a low heat, because what happens is that when you do that, the water comes out of them, and then they're just in like a lake of water, and they turn out to be soggy. And
Mhm.
how many people have you heard say, oh yeah, mushrooms, yeah, soggy, slimy things, I hate them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not cooked properly. I like to cook them on a high heat. I like to brown them up. I like to cook them in butter. That's my oil for that type, for the mushroom.
Yeah.
Um, and I will brown the outsides of them. I'll cook them a little longer than most, just because I like them to be fairly well cooked, and I think they're tastier that way, and they will shrink. So, I mean, you take one or two mushrooms, throw them in there, and after you've cooked them, you'll go like, where the hell are they? No,
Mhm.
they will shrink up. So, I mean, listen, I've sat down at times, and I can eat 200 grams of fresh mushrooms in a sitting with no problem at all. Easy. And look, I'm also a meat eater, and I like to use mushrooms on when I eat a
Steak.
piece of meat or something, like
Yeah.
I'll smother them in mushrooms and really like them that way too. But no, cooking them, it's important. And I think with cooking, you're always going to lose some nutrients on whatever it is, but
Yeah.
like if you're on barbecuing or anything like that. But I think in general, and when we're cooking mushrooms that way, you'll be okay. Hot fry pan, cook them up fast, so to speak, not too
Yeah.
fast, and they'll be really tasty. I usually put a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper,
Yeah.
and then, oh boy, tasty.
Oh boy. Awesome. Okay. So back to the supplements. So your company, Namex, is all organic supplements. What sort of mushrooms do you guys sell? Is it a bunch of different ones, or what do you guys focus on?
Well, I have a book from China called Icons of Medicinal Mushrooms, and they list 270 different species of medicinal properties. And
Wow.
I'm like, okay, fine, but that's not going to work. So I look at traditional Chinese medicine and I go, how many mushrooms are really used a lot in traditional Chinese medicine? And there's about a dozen.
Hmm.
And then I go and I look at the science and I say, what kind of scientific backing do we have? What kind of research that has looked into these particular species and says, oh yeah, these are really active? So there's about 10 species, and probably 5 of them are choice edible mushrooms. That would be shiitake, maitake. Lion's mane is really delicious, fresh. Man, if you can get lion's mane, do it. Wonderful mushroom. The other one too, have you ever heard of cordyceps?
No, I haven't.
Cordyceps is actually called caterpillar fungus. It's
Okay.
a mushroom that actually grows on a caterpillar, but today we can cultivate it without the caterpillar. It is
It
really,
grows on a caterpillar?
yeah.
What?
Let me lay it out for you a little
Yeah,
bit.
please.
It grows up in the foothills of Tibet, out in the
Okay.
pastures. And what happens is this caterpillar hibernates in the wintertime, and it crawls down under the ground and hibernates. Well, it's got spores of this fungus on it. Doesn't know that, but
Hmm.
while it's sleeping, those spores germinate. The mycelium goes in, consumes this caterpillar completely. All that's left of it is a shell. And
Wow.
and in the summertime, when the caterpillar is supposed to wake up and be a moth and fly away, no, instead a little tiny mushroom comes up that's kind of like a blade of grass. It doesn't look like a normal mushroom. It's actually called winter worm summer grass. That's the translation of what the Chinese call it. This thing has been used in China for a long time. It literally is the most expensive herb in the world. It reached a point where it was selling for $20,000 a dried kilogram.
Wow.
$20,000 a
That is,
dried kilogram. I mean, it got to the point where people were fighting over the grounds where it was growing. You know, if somebody comes into your neighborhood and starts looking for it, you're out there and you're like, get the hell out of here. I mean, literally. And so anyway, it's a really interesting mushroom. They just learned how to cultivate it. So the price now of the cultivated one is much, much cheaper. Now it's something that's actually affordable. It's been used for weakness and fatigue. And because of that, it's starting to be used by a lot of athletes just to see if they, you know, the oxygen utilization is not better, things like that. And here's the way they test herbal products for that quality. They will feed a mouse a certain amount of this herb, in this case, let's just say cordyceps,
okay.
and then they will put it in a tank of water, and it will swim around, and it will swim and swim and swim until finally it stops, and then they will pull it out. But they'll be timing it, right? And then they'll put another mouse in there without the cordyceps and let it swim around. Well, what they found in some of these swimming tests is that with certain herbs, they can swim longer. So that's one of the ways. And you know, when people say, "Oh yeah, this product's been tested for endurance and things like that," well, that's what they're kind of talking about, how it is tested. No mice were harmed in this.
Yeah.
They were stronger after the end of it.
Oh, they worked out, of course.
They had a good workout. That's right.
Now, so someone listening to this episode, they go, okay, I want to get into some mushrooms, but I want to get some supplements. First, can they get Namex supplements online, or how do they get yours? Or if they're just going to a typical store, how does someone determine if, you know, it's a good quality supplement or not? Is there any kind of signs or things that they should be looking for?
Oh yeah. That's like it's incredible, Kyle. I'll tell you, there are products in the marketplace that are called mushroom that are not even mushroom. It's insane. What happens is that companies in the United States, I was telling you, you can't grow mushrooms for supplements in the United States. It's too expensive. So what they do is they will grow that mycelium out on sterilized grain. And then once it's all covered with the mycelium, they will dry it, grind it to a powder. They won't remove the grain. And when you test it, it turns out it is mostly starch from all the grains that's in it. And then they'll put it into the markets, the supplement markets, and the label will say reishi mushroom, shiitake mushroom, and they'll have a picture of a mushroom. And it is not, there's not a mushroom in there. It's nothing but this ground up grain powder. Now here's the test for you. Okay, you ready? Do you know what tempeh is?
Yep.
Yeah, you're probably eating it while you're in Bali. I mean, tempeh's all over Indonesia, right? Well, do you know how they make tempeh?
I believe it's fermented tofu, no?
Close.
Yeah.
It's actually fermented soybeans.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what they do is they cook soybeans and then they put a fungus on it.
Okay.
So when you look at tempeh is kind of white. It's this white growth, and you're sitting there, wow, that's kind of cool. And you slice it up and you see the soybeans in there. That is mycelium. So tempeh is actually eating fungal mycelium that's been grown on cooked soybeans. Well, it's a food, right? Well, that's what these people are doing, and they're grinding it up, and they're calling it mushroom. It's not a mushroom. And in fact, it's like with tempeh. Tempeh is mostly the soybean, but it's got this mycelium on it, this fungal mycelium on it, which is part of the process to make the product called tempeh. It's a cool food. I mean, you can use it in a lot of different ways, but that's what they're selling. So the way to know this is you can turn over the label, and if you're lucky in the supplements facts, it'll say mycelium. And maybe down in the fine print where it says other, which means other ingredients, it might say myceliated rice or myceliated oats.
Okay.
A lot of times it won't even say mycelium or any of that. It'll just say mushroom. But the real way to know is if it says made in the USA.
I was going to ask that.
It is in fact this myceliated grain. And look, you know what? You can just pour out those capsules and you can taste it, and it is like, man, this tastes like flour.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what it is. And you know, some people out there are paleo, right? They're totally on a paleo diet. They're not into grains at all. Yeah. And I've met people like that, and they tell me, man, I'm taking this great mushroom product. I love mushrooms. And I'm like, okay, what brand is it? Oh man, when they tell me the brand, I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but you're mostly consuming grain powder, and they are just like shocked.
Oh, I'm going to run to my room right after this and see what my the supplement I have downstairs is.
Well, and you know what? If you're out in Bali, if it's you know, one of the Southeast Asian products, there's a good chance.
I got it from a company in Canada, though. They sent it to me before I got here, so I'm nervous.
So, well, I'll tell you. We could afterwards. You can tell me, and
okay,
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Good. So, are you looking then for them to be grown in China? Is it typically if they're grown there, they're going to be good, or is there still some bad products there as well?
Oh, geez, you know, China's a minefield too. It really is.
And
not only that, they'll sell some products sometimes where, well, they'll make the extract and they'll put the extract onto some starch carrier. Mm-hmm. So the extract that they've got, what they call a mushroom extract, maybe there's some extract there, but there's also all of this starch in there as well. I've seen that because this is what's cool about it is we have a test where we can test all of these different products, and we can determine the level of beta glucans and the level of starch. And the thing is that mushrooms do not have starch. Remember I was telling you earlier how mushrooms have glycogen? They don't have starch. They have glycogen, and the amount of glycogen is usually very low, like under 5%. When I test these myceliated tempeh-like grain products, they are 30 to 60% starch. Wow. It is unreal. And the amount of beta-glucans is like around 5%, when most mushrooms that we sell, the medicinal mushrooms, the beta-glucans are 25 to 60%. So it's just absolutely the opposite. And it's just, you know, you just have to be so careful when you're going out there looking for a mushroom supplement. I mean, you can end up with one of these products thinking you're getting a great product because the person who is selling those products is he's a actor that's well known or something like this, or he's a celebrity, right? And you go, oh yeah, I love that guy. Oh yeah, he's touting this mushroom product. Must be good. Yeah, right.
It's like anything in the supplement industry. You got to be really careful because at least 90% of it is pretty much garbage, which is unfortunate. But that's again why I push whole foods. Just eat real food before anything, and then if you need to supplement, sure, but be careful about what you're getting. Now, I had asked, but didn't get a clear answer to get the supplements that you guys sell, which are organic and really high quality, made in China. How can we get our hands on some of those?
Well, my company Namex, NAMMEX.com, Namex, we sell actually the bulk powders to other companies, but we do have a retail. We do have a retail part of the company that sells on the internet, and you can find us there at realmushrooms.com, and that's where you can get all of our extracts you can get them either in capsule form or you can get bulk powders. I mean, realmushrooms.com was developed by my son, who's probably about your age, and he he has a smoothie every day. I don't know about you, but both of my sons have smoothies every day. They're like all sorts of stuff in, right? And so we started out with doing it all in pouches, right? Okay. And that's cool. That's how I have my reishi here. It's in a pouch, and I take a teaspoon out and throw it in, and that's cool. So, so you can get it either in a pouch, or you can get it in capsule form. Reishi, if you want to try reishi, unless you're into bitters, get the capsules. Okay. But otherwise, like things with the lion's mane or cordyceps, like that, I just get them in the powder and toss them into a smoothie. The taste is good.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, the lion's mane tastes good. Same with the cordyceps, tastes really mushroomy. So but realmushrooms.com, that's where you can find our products.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I don't have any other questions, but I'm curious, is there anything that we missed on mushrooms that you think that we need to know? Is there any sort of interesting things that are burning in your mind that you need to share here? Just let me know before we wrap this up.
Sure. Well, you know what? I guess what I would say is, what I tell people is look, start out by putting mushrooms into your diet.
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms are a great food, and they're kind of one of the it's a missing link in a lot of diets. In Asia, they've been eating mushrooms now for thousands of years. When I'm in China, I mean, almost every meal will have a mushroom dish,
Mm-hmm.
and then there will be other dishes that will have mushrooms as part of the dish. I mean, they've got 12 different mushrooms in the marketplace. They eat a lot of mushrooms in Asia, and I think that's something, first of all, that everybody should get into. Right? And the one I recommend to people is shiitake. I mean, I like the button mushroom too. I mean, I lived with it for 10 years. What can I say? I still love it. but shiitake is wonderful. In China, the name for shiitake is shangu, and that means fragrant mushroom. Man, the odor of the shiitake, the flavor of it, it is wonderful. So that's the one I highly recommend to people. And if you're lucky enough to have lion's mane in your market, try some of it. The other one I really like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, it's called enoki, and it's a little bundle of about, I don't know, 500 mushrooms with very, very thin stems and little tiny cap, and they're kind of whitish, and they come in a kind of it's a vacuum packed little thing, and you open it up and you just kind of strip them away. They're crunchy, they're noodly, they're really cool and taste really good. So before you supplement, put mushrooms into your diet, and then if you really think you need a supplement and want something to kind of bolster your immunity. And listen, the other thing too is mushrooms do not work overnight. It takes time. They're kind of working in the background there. It takes time. So don't expect, like the next day you're out running a marathon or anything like that. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I would like to share with your listeners is, mushrooms are a great food. They can be a good medicine. They are food as medicine.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate you coming here on this episode today. This was super interesting. I didn't know a lot about mushrooms before this, so excited to now have this knowledge, and excited to go check out the supplement that I have downstairs. If people want to learn more about mushrooms and more about kind of the work that you do, is there a website? Is there somewhere that they should go, or where can you?
Namex.com is our website, and we've got so much information there. We've also got really some great slideshows, how mushrooms are grown, things like that. But we have a ton of good information there. So please come to Namex.com, check it all out. Lots of good information where you can learn more about the kingdom of fungi and mushrooms in particular.
Awesome. All right, Jeff. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy your day there in Tofino. Hopefully the weather's nice.